My name is Kaylee Speeney, and I'm 39 years old. For 23 years, I built an entire life on the foundation of one devastating lie, and then my mother decided to marry the man I had loved and lost. She never told me. I found out when I walked into the medical office where I work as a surgeon and saw his name on the patient roster, followed by her maiden name in the spouse line. The thing that makes this story unbearable isn't the lie my sister told when I was 16. It isn't the rejection that followed, or the years I spent proving myself to people who had already decided I wasn't worth believing in. It's that I had finally, built something good enough to stand on. I had become someone. And then the universe decided to remind me that I had never actually mattered to the people whose opinion I'd spent decades trying to change. Let me rewind. Let me tell you how a girl gets erased. I was born in Sacramento to two parents who desperately wanted a boy. I know this because my mother told me when I was old enough to understand the disappointment in her voice. My father wanted to pass his name to a son. My mother wanted a son to carry her father's legacy in medicine. Instead, they got me, a quiet girl with her mother's face and her father's stubborn streak, born in 1984 on a Tuesday no one particularly remembers. My older sister, Monica, came into the world 3 years earlier as an apology for what I would later understand was the family's inability to accept what they couldn't control. She was bright, beautiful, athletic, and designed by circumstance to be everything our parents had imagined for themselves. She had blue eyes like our father. She had our mother's intelligence but without the clinical precision. Monica's intelligence was social, intuitive, calculated. She knew how to move through rooms. She knew how to make people want things for her. I was the footnote, the accidental daughter, the one who came along when they'd already resigned themselves to having only Monica. My childhood wasn't traumatic in the way people understand trauma now. I wasn't abused. I wasn't neglected in any way that would show on X-rays or in court documents. What happened to me was something quieter, something that took me decades to even name. I was systematically made invisible in my own family. Monica had soccer games and debate tournaments. I had a science fair project in 4th grade that I spent 6 weeks on, a project about how different plants responded to various wavelengths of light. I was obsessed with it. I documented everything in a leather-bound notebook. I built a light box from scratch. I stayed up late reading journal articles I didn't quite understand yet, trying to grasp the mechanism of photosynthesis at a level that would impress people who actually cared. My mother asked me once while setting the table for dinner, "How's your little plant thing going?" I remember the exact heat of shame I felt at the diminishment, the little plant thing, but I pushed forward. "It's really interesting," I said, trying to make her understand. "Did you know that plants can actually—" "That's nice, honey," she said, and she left the room. The science fair was on a Saturday. My father had a golf tournament that morning. My mother had promised to be there by 2 o'clock. At 1:47 p.m. I stood beside my display board in the gymnasium of Fremont Elementary School, watching the clock. At 2:15 p.m. a volunteer told me I needed to leave the hallway so the judges could look at the projects. Monica had a soccer tournament that day too, a playoff game 2 hours away. My father chose to see Monica play. My mother called me at 4 p.m. from her car. "Sweetie, I'm so sorry. Monica had such an important game and the traffic was worse than I thought." I didn't cry. That's the part I remember most clearly. I didn't cry because I had already learned that my disappointment wasn't interesting enough to warrant tears. I just said, "It's okay, Mom, I understand." She didn't go to the science fair. She didn't ask about my results. She didn't know that I got a blue ribbon or that the judges told me my methodology was remarkably sophisticated for a child your age. How could she? She had never been there to see it. This was the pattern. This was the architecture of my childhood. Monica played volleyball, basketball, and soccer. She ran track. She was on the debate team. She had a drama club role in the spring musical. She was the social epicenter of everything, and my parents orbited her like she was the sun. My father would leave work early for her games. My mother volunteered in the school office just to be near her world. They didn't do these things for Monica out of pressure. They did it because they wanted to. Because Monica deserved it. Because Monica was the kind of daughter who made parenting feel like an accomplishment. I was good at things. I was excellent at things. By the time I was in high school, I was taking honors chemistry and AP biology. I was building independent research projects. I was the kind of student who teachers told, "You could really do something special with science." But this intelligence existed in a vacuum. It didn't translate to my parents' perception of me. Intelligence wasn't valued the same way athletic achievement was. Solitary brilliance didn't hold the same weight as public performance. And then there was the question of who I was becoming. Monica knew how to make people need her. I learned instead how to make myself useful. I learned how to be helpful, quiet, undemanding. I learned that my value was in not being trouble, in being the kind of daughter who didn't need anything, who didn't ask for much, who kept her own counsel. By 16, I had perfected the art of self-erasure. Monica was 19 that year. She was home from her first year at UC Davis, where she was studying business and making the kinds of friends who would matter: future lawyers, future entrepreneurs, future people with connections. Monica understood that her college experience was an investment in her future social and financial capital. She was already calculating the returns. I was a sophomore at Franklin High School, invisible in the way that is the specific curse of intelligent, quiet girls. I wasn't unpopular, but I wasn't popular. I had a few close friends: Sarah, who loved books the way I loved science, and Daniel, who sat next to me in chemistry and understood things about the world in the same methodical way I did. The three of us existed in the margins of high school, taking comfort in the fact that we were all too absorbed in our own interests to care much about social hierarchy. But I cared about something else, something that was making me less invisible in a way that both thrilled and terrified me. His name was James, and he was a junior. He was tall in the way that mattered in 2000, wearing vintage band t-shirts before vintage band t-shirts were ironic, reading David Foster Wallace, talking about film in a way that made you feel like you were missing something important about the world. He was the kind of boy who made you want to be interesting. He made you want to have read things and understood things and cared about things in this very specific, intellectual way. I met him in the library. I was researching cellular biology for a project. He was actually reading a physical book, not just skimming, a collection of short stories by some author I didn't know. We ended up at the same study table because it was the only one left, and he asked me if I minded him sitting there. I said no. And then, remarkably, he started talking to me. "What are you researching?" he asked, and I could tell he actually wanted to know. Not like an adult asking a child what they're doing, like a person asking another person what they're reading about, with genuine intellectual curiosity. I told him about mitosis, about the phases of cell division, about how absolutely extraordinary it was that cells knew how to replicate themselves, that there was this encoded instruction manual in every living thing. He listened, and then he said, "That's kind of beautiful, isn't it, that the code knows what to do without thinking about it?" I remember looking at him and feeling something shift inside me. I remember thinking very clearly, this person sees me. We started spending time together. The library became a place we could find each other. We talked about books and science and the way the world was accelerating into something we didn't quite understand. He lent me copies of things: Kafka, Rothko, a photocopied article about quantum mechanics. He asked me what I thought about them. My thoughts mattered to him. My observations were worth engaging with. By the time winter came, we were inseparable. By spring, we were in love in the way that 16 and 17-year-olds are in love, completely, absolutely. With the certainty that this person was the first person to ever truly see us, and therefore this person was the only person who would ever see us. I told Monica about him. This is the detail I need to linger on, because this is where the betrayal begins, and I need you to understand how betrayal doesn't always announce itself. It often comes disguised as sisterhood, as confidence, as intimacy. We were in her car. She was home for the weekend, and I was riding with her to pick up groceries. She asked me if there was anyone at school, and I found myself telling her about James, not to seek approval, though I wanted that too, but because I needed someone to understand that something significant was happening to me, that I, quiet, invisible Kaylee, had become someone's world. Monica listened with a smile on her face. She asked questions. She wanted to know how we met, what we talked about, what he was like. She said the things a good older sister says. "He sounds nice, I'm happy for you, you deserve to be happy." And I believed her. I fed her information about James like I was making deposits into a trust account. I told her about the time he brought me wildflowers he'd picked on a hike. I told her about the letter he wrote me, actual letter, in his handwriting, about how I had changed his understanding of what it meant to be known. I told her about the night we said we loved each other, standing in the parking lot of Ralph's grocery store at 11 p.m., because neither of us wanted to waste the moment on a more ordinary setting. I was feeding her ammunition, that's how I understand it now. I was showing her exactly where to aim. My parents didn't know about James, not directly, but in the way that parents develop peripheral knowledge of teenage lives, they knew I was different. They knew I was happier. They knew there was something taking up space in my mind that wasn't schoolwork. One night at dinner, my father asked, "Are you seeing anyone, Kaylee?" I froze. My mother was watching me with a specific kind of attention, the kind that suggested she already knew something. Yes, I said, there's someone, his name is James. The silence that followed was the kind that lands heavy. My father set down his fork. How old is he? His tone had shifted from casual to investigative. He's a junior, he's 17. I could see my mother processing this information, comparing it against some internal database of propriety. I could see her concluding that I was too young for this to be anything but a distraction. Is he focusing on school? She asked. It wasn't a question about his academics. It was a question about his utility to my future. Yes, I said, he's really smart, he reads a lot. That's nice, my father said, in the way that men dismiss things they don't understand or value. Don't let it distract you from your work. That was it, the conversation died, but I could feel something shift in the air. I could feel them making a decision about me, or maybe just confirming a decision they'd already made. That I was the kind of daughter who could be distracted by boys, that I was less serious than they'd assumed, that I was perhaps less exceptional than they'd pretended to believe. What I didn't know was that Monica had already told them something different. I found out 3 months later. It was a Sunday, and I was in my room doing homework when my mother came in and closed the door, a gesture that meant something serious was happening. She had a particular kind of face on, the face that suggested she had come to deliver justice rather than conversation. "I need to talk to you about James," she said. My stomach dropped. "What about him?" "Your sister told me that you've been seeing him. Not she mentioned he existed. Not she told me about him." The phrasing suggested a crime discovered, a secret exposed. "Yes, I've been seeing him. I told Dad about him." "You told your father you were dating him. What you didn't mention was that he was already seeing someone else." The room tilted. "What?" "Apparently, James has been dating his ex-girlfriend, and seeing you at the same time. Monica found out because she ran into his ex at the mall, and she recognized your name when the girl talked about James's other girlfriend." I remember the exact quality of the shock. I remember my brain trying to parse what she was saying, trying to fit it into a narrative that made sense. James wouldn't do that. James wasn't that kind of person. James saw me. James loved me. "That's not true," I said. "I don't know what Monica told you, but—" "Monica talked to his ex-girlfriend," my mother said, cutting me off. The implication was clear. There was corroboration. There was evidence. I had been chosen for betrayal. What I didn't understand then, what I only understood years later, after I had learned enough about how people work, was that Monica hadn't found out anything. Monica had constructed a narrative. She had perhaps identified someone who knew James, perhaps someone who actually was his ex. She had woven together a story that sounded convincing enough, specific enough, real enough that it could pass for truth. And the genius of it, and I use that word with disgust, was that Monica didn't need to prove James was cheating. She only needed my parents to believe it. She only needed to position herself as the one who cared about my welfare, who was protecting me from harm, who had the clarity to see what I was too naive to see. I went to confront James. I met him at the library, the place where we had fallen into love, and I asked him directly. I asked him if he was seeing someone else. He looked at me like I had struck him. "Number Kaylee, where is this coming from?" "My sister said—" "Your sister," he said, and something in his voice changed, something closed. "What did your sister say?" I told him, and I watched his face go through all the stages of understanding, and then through something worse, resignation. "There is no one else," he said. "I swear to you, but your sister—" He stopped. He put his head in his hands. "Your sister asked me a lot of questions about us a few weeks ago. She was really friendly about it, really interested. I thought it was nice that you had confided in her." "She's lying," I said. The words felt very small and very fragile. "I know," he said, "but that doesn't matter, does it, if your family believes her and not me?" He was right, it didn't matter. And that's when I understood something that would take me years to fully articulate. Trust is not a logical thing. Trust is a story people tell themselves about who to believe, and Monica had written a better story than I had. My mother said I could not see James anymore. My father said I had been irresponsible and naive. My sister said she was only trying to protect me, and that she was sorry, but a girl my age couldn't possibly understand the ways boys manipulated girls. I tried to defend James. I tried to explain that Monica had to be wrong, that he wouldn't do this, but my credibility had been spent. I had been wrong about him, they said, or I had been willing to be lied to. Either way, I couldn't be trusted to make good decisions. James tried to contact me. He called the house and my father told him never to call again. He wrote me a letter and my mother intercepted it. He tried to talk to me at school, and I was told that associating with him would only deepen my shame. So I stopped, because I was 16 and I didn't have the resources to maintain faith in someone when everyone I lived with was telling me I was delusional. Because I was young, and young people have a particular vulnerability to authority figures. Because I was, fundamentally, someone who had been taught to make myself small and invisible, and disappearing from James's life felt like the appropriate thing to do. He graduated that spring. I heard that he went to Stanford. I heard years later that he became a software engineer in Silicon Valley. I heard that he was married, that he had kids, that he had built a good life. Good, I was glad. But there was a cut in me that never quite healed, a place where I had learned that the most dangerous thing you could do was let someone see you. What happened after that was systematic. My parents didn't explicitly forbid me from dating again, but the message was clear. Boys were distractions. Boys were liars. Boys were obstacles to the kind of daughter they wanted me to become. And so I became exactly that daughter. I threw myself into school. I got straight A's in every class. I took every AP exam available and scored 5s in all of them. I did volunteer work at a hospital and shadowed a surgeon at UC Davis. I built my resume like I was constructing a fortress, brick by brick, achievement by achievement, making it impossible for anyone to accuse me of being lazy or unfocused or naive again. Monica noticed. Of course she did. By the time I was a senior, I was on track to be valedictorian. I was being recruited by UC Berkeley, Stanford, Princeton. I was, for the first time in my life, being seen by people outside my family as exceptional. And Monica, who had spent her entire life being the special one, was not happy about it. She was 22 by then, having finished her degree at Davis, and she was working at a consulting firm in Los Angeles. She had married a man named Derek, someone she'd met through connections, someone from a family with money. She was building a very specific kind of life, the kind where everything was calculated to add up to a particular image of success. She called me on a Thursday night in March. I remember this because it was the night before my last physics exam, and I had been planning to study until midnight. I wanted to be the one to tell you, she said, her voice constructed with a particular kind of false sweetness. Before Mom and Dad told you. Tell me what? I asked. That I'm pregnant. The word sat between us like a stone. Monica was pregnant, and she wanted me to hear it from her first so that she could control the narrative, so that she could position herself as the one being generous, being sisterly, being kind. I congratulated her. What else could I do? Thank you, she said. I want our kids to be close, you know. I want them to grow up together the way we did. We had not grown up the way she described. We had grown up in the same house, but we had inhabited entirely different families. But I didn't say that. That sounds nice, I said. I hope so, she said. I'm hoping you're going to be a good influence on them. I'm hoping you're going to have your life together. It would be tragic if you ended up like some of those girls from our class, you know, the ones who didn't have their priorities straight and just kind of squandered everything. She was testing me. She was creating a hierarchy where my worthiness would be measured against the standard of girls who didn't have their priorities straight. She was making sure I understood that my goodness was conditional on comparison, on being better than on having more. I'm going to medical school, I said. The certainty in my voice surprised me. I hadn't fully decided yet. I had been considering it, obviously. My entire life had been orchestrated to lead to this decision, but I hadn't claimed it out loud. Oh, Monica said, and I could hear the recalculation happening in real time. Medical school meant status. Medical school meant I was going to be the kind of person who made money, who had respect, who had done exactly what our parents had always wanted a child to do. That's wonderful, Mom's going to be so proud. The irony was so sharp it drew blood. I got into Stanford Medical School. I got a full scholarship. I was the youngest person in my cohort by 8 months. I was the kind of medical student who could have been a poster child for ambition and excellence, and I was. My parents came to my white coat ceremony. For the first time since elementary school, they seemed actually proud of me. Not just satisfied that I had made good choices, but genuinely, visibly proud. Monica sent flowers. The card said, "To my brilliant sister, I always knew you'd be special." The lie was so enormous that it had come full circle into something resembling truth. Medical school was brutal in a way that I think only people who have done it can really understand. It wasn't just the information overload, though there was certainly that. By second year, I was expected to know the pharmacology of compounds I'd never heard of, to understand disease mechanisms that had taken professors decades to fully grasp, to do all of this while working 24-hour shifts on almost no sleep. It was the psychological component. Medical school teaches you to devalue yourself. It teaches you that your suffering is necessary, that your exhaustion is temporary, that your emotional needs are secondary to the needs of people who are actually dying. It teaches you that if you can't handle this, you shouldn't be here. If you're struggling, you're not cut out for this. If you break down, you're weak. I internalized all of this before I was even aware I was learning it. I thrived on the exhaustion because it justified my existence. I was suffering for a reason asterisk, for the future patients I would save, for the status it would give me, for the proof it would provide to everyone who had ever doubted me. I had a boyfriend during my 3rd year of medical school. His name was David, and he was a resident in the same hospital where I did my clinical rotations. He was kind in a way that made me suspicious. He was attentive in a way that felt like danger. He seemed genuinely interested in who I was, not who I was performing. I kept a careful distance. I had learned my lesson with James. I knew that letting someone see you was the fastest way to give them the power to hurt you. So I was measured, controlled, strategic in my engagement with David. I gave him access to the version of me that was acceptable to receive access to. After 6 months of dating, he asked me to move in with him. After a year, he asked me to marry him. I said yes because it was the right time to say yes, because it fit the timeline of what a serious person did, because it meant I was the kind of woman who had her life in order. The wedding was small. My parents came. Monica came with Derek and their 2 children, a girl named Madison and a boy named Logan. She cried during the ceremony, the kind of theatrical cry that suggested she had practiced it. David was a good person, a kind person, a person who wanted very much to be married to me, but he was not a person I loved in the way that made sense to love someone. I married him because he was available, because he was acceptable, because my mother seemed pleased. I married him the way people marry the life they're supposed to have. We divorced 4 years later. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't particularly painful, which was somehow worse. I realized one day that I had no idea what David actually liked about the world, that he had never seen me, that I had never shown him anything real about myself. And when I tried to figure out why, when I tried to understand what had made it impossible for me to be vulnerable with someone who deserved it, I couldn't articulate an answer. By then, I was in residency. I was in the most intense phase of my life, on the path to becoming exactly what I had always been told to become. I was sleeping in the hospital 3 nights a week. I was learning to operate. I was watching people die and die and die, learning how to care for them while maintaining the emotional distance that would allow me to do it again tomorrow. My parents told me I should focus on my work. Monica told me that David had probably just been the wrong fit. Neither of them suggested that the problem might be me, might be that I had spent so much time learning how to disappear that I had forgotten how to be present. I was 28 years old, and I had accomplished everything I had been told to accomplish. I was a surgeon at a prestigious teaching hospital. I was published. I was respected. I was exactly the person my parents had hoped to create. And I had never been less happy in my life. The thing about surviving on achievement is that it works for a very long time. You can feed the engine of accomplishment, and it will run. You can tell yourself that happiness is coming next, after you finish residency, after you get the position you want, after you reach some arbitrary milestone that you've decided marks the point where you're allowed to rest. But happiness doesn't work that way. Happiness is not a destination. It's a daily practice of being present to your own life, of acknowledging what you feel, of allowing yourself to have needs that someone else might meet. I didn't understand this. What I understood was that I had survived 28 years by not needing anything from anyone. What I understood was that asking for help was the same as admitting failure. What I understood was that the world was divided into people who were worth seeing and people who would disappear if they weren't careful. So I built walls. I built them very high and very thick. I told myself that my solitude was a choice, that my distance from other people was a strategy, that my inability to trust anyone was a sign of strength rather than a symptom of deep, untreated trauma. When I was 32 years old, I had a breakdown in the on-call room of the hospital where I was training. I didn't cry. I had learned very well not to cry in public. Instead, I sat on a cot that smelled like other people's exhaustion, and I became aware of a hollow feeling in my chest that I had been ignoring for so long that it felt like part of my skeleton. I was successful. I was respected. I was entirely alone. A therapist I started seeing, someone my hospital mandated I talk to after a close colleague killed himself, asked me once, "When was the last time you felt truly seen by someone?" I thought about it for a very long time. "When I was 16, I said finally, and it ended very badly. "Can you tell me about that?" she asked. So I did. I told her about James. I told her about Monica's lie. I told her about the way I had learned that love and visibility were the same thing as vulnerability, and vulnerability was the same thing as danger. I told her that I had spent 20 years arranging my entire life to ensure that I would never be vulnerable again. "Has that worked?" she asked. "I'm alive," I said. "I'm successful, "That's not what I asked," she said. "Has it worked?" No, it hadn't. What it had done was make me very, very good at pretending to be whole while being fundamentally fractured. What it had done was teach me to present the version of myself that was acceptable to other people while never actually believing that the deeper version, the real version, was worth showing. Working with my therapist was like learning to see after decades of being blind. She helped me understand that what had happened with James wasn't actually about his infidelity, which I eventually learned was fabricated, a story Monica had constructed to maintain her position as my parents' favorite child. It was about the fact that I had internalized the lesson that my perception of reality was wrong, that I couldn't trust my own judgment, that the people I loved would hurt me because they could. And I had built my entire life on the foundation of that belief. I was 34 when I met Thomas. He was a trauma surgeon at the same hospital where I was building my practice in cardiothoracic surgery. He was different from David. He was someone who had also built himself carefully, who had also learned that survival required distance, who also held the world at arm's length. We recognized something in each other immediately. It was like looking into a mirror and seeing someone you'd been too afraid to examine too closely. Thomas didn't push. He didn't ask me to open up, didn't suggest that vulnerability was the path to intimacy, didn't try to convince me that I was wrong about how the world worked. Instead, he created a space where we could both exist in our careful, controlled ways, and something could still grow between us. It took 3 years of dating before I told him I loved him. It took another year before I moved in with him. We got married in my mother's garden because that was the kind of wedding that made sense for people like us. Small, controlled, beautiful in a way that required no actual revealing of emotion. My parents approved of Thomas. Monica approved of Thomas. Thomas was successful, educated, accomplished. Thomas was the kind of man who made sense for a woman like me. What they didn't know was that Thomas and I had made an implicit agreement. We would not require each other to be real. We would provide companionship, sexual compatibility, the social arrangement of partnership, but we would not ask the other person to actually be vulnerable. We would not require the other person to let us see them. It was, in its way, the most honest relationship I'd ever been in. We both knew what we were doing. We both knew what we weren't doing. We moved through our marriage like two careful dancers, never touching too closely, never losing rhythm, never falling. And for a while it was enough. My parents were agging in the way that parents do, very slowly until they suddenly aren't. My father had had a minor heart attack when I was 37. He recovered well. I made sure of that, called in favors, got him the best cardiologist in Northern California, but something had shifted in him. He was aware of his own mortality in a way he hadn't been before. My mother was dealing with the early stages of osteoporosis. Nothing serious yet, but it was the kind of thing that demanded attention, that required her to think about her future in terms of what might be taken away from her. I think this is what made her vulnerable to Monica's plans. Not vulnerability in the emotional sense, but in the sense of needing something, of not being able to manufacture what she wanted through force of will alone. Monica called me in the spring of 2022. I was 37 years old. I had been married to Thomas for 5 years. I had a successful surgical practice. I had published 4 papers that year. I was, on the surface, exactly the person I had always been meant to become. I have some news about Mom, Monica said. She wants to tell you, but I wanted to give you a heads up first. Is she okay? I asked immediately. This was the role I had accepted. I was the child who cared about health, who took medical concerns seriously, who responded to crises with appropriate alarm. She's fine, it's not a health thing. Monica paused and I could hear her smiling through the phone. She's been dating someone, it's getting pretty serious, I think. I was stunned. My father had been dead for 18 months. Who? I asked. His name is Robert. He's a retired professor from Sacramento State. Very nice man, educated, he seems to make her happy. I registered all of this information, filed it away. My mother was dating. My mother, who had been married for 45 years, who had spent the last year and a half grieving, who I had assumed would continue in that state of grief indefinitely, was moving forward. That's nice, I said, and I meant it, even as some part of me felt the sting of exclusion. She had told Monica first. Monica had gotten the heads up before me. She wants to have everyone over for dinner soon, Monica said. She wants to introduce him to all of us. I told her I'd let you know. Okay, I said, when? Maybe next month, she's still figuring out details, but she wanted to make sure you could make it. I said yes. Of course I said yes. This was the kind of family gathering I had learned to navigate with precision, the kind where everyone pretended to be closer than they actually were, where we all performed versions of ourselves that were palatable, where the subtext was always more important than the text. My mother called the next day. She sounded different, lighter, somehow younger. She told me about Robert. They had met at a book club. He had been widowed 5 years ago. He was kind, he was interested in her, he made her laugh. I listened and said the appropriate things. I was genuinely happy for her, even as I felt that old familiar sting. She had never sounded that way about my father. She had sounded dutiful when she talked about him, responsible. But she had never sounded the way she sounded talking about Robert, like she had been surprised by joy. When will I get to meet him? I asked. Next month, she said. I'm planning a dinner, just family. I want it to be casual. I don't want it to feel like a big deal. It was a big deal, of course. It was the announcement that my mother was willing to love someone else. It was the announcement that the life she had lived with my father was going to be restructured around this new person. It was, in many ways, the most important dinner my mother had hosted since my parents got married. And she sounded happy about it. For the first time in a long time, my mother sounded actually happy. I should have known something was wrong when Monica insisted on coming a day early to help my mother prepare. Monica lived in Los Angeles, 2 hours away. She had never come early to a family dinner in her life, but when I mentioned this to Thomas, just a passing observation while we were discussing the logistics of the gathering, he said, maybe she's just being helpful. Thomas was a kind man, but he was not perceptive about the undercurrents of other people's families. He had his own parents who he saw twice a year, and they were the kind of people who didn't have undercurrents. They were straightforward. They wanted what they said they wanted. They didn't use family dinners as chess moves. The dinner was scheduled for a Saturday in May. Thomas and I drove to my parents' house, well, my mother's house now. It was the same house we had always gathered in, the one where I had learned not to matter, where my mother had never come to my science fair, where I had been told again and again through action, rather than words, that my achievements didn't equal Monica's simple existence. I arrived at 4 in the afternoon. Monica was already there. She was in the kitchen with my mother, laughing about something, a scene of domestic harmony that didn't quite look real. It was too perfectly framed, too aware of itself. Kaylee, my mother said, hugging me. She smelled like her usual perfume. But there was something different underneath it, something like hope or maybe just newness. Hi, Mom, I said, you look nice. She did look nice. She had done something different with her hair. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. I'm excited, she said. Robert will be here at 6. He's very much looking forward to meeting you all. Monica smiled at me from across the counter. It was the smile of someone who knows something that I don't know, someone who has already been told the secret that's about to be revealed. "How's work?" Monica asked, and we fell into our usual pattern of conversation, the careful territory where we could acknowledge each other's existence without ever really connecting. Thomas arrived just before 5. He had been at the hospital. He showered and changed into the clothes I had laid out for him, the same careful performance of togetherness that we did at every family event. At 6:15 the doorbell rang. My mother stood up. She had been sitting on the couch waiting like a teenager on a first date. "He's here," she said, and she went to answer the door. I heard the sound of a man's voice. I heard laughter. And then my mother came back into the living room, and next to her was a man I had never seen before. Tall, white hair, kind eyes. He was maybe 15 years older than my mother, which made him in his early 70s. He was exactly the kind of man my mother deserved to love, distinguished, educated, someone who seemed to take up space with quiet confidence. "Everyone," my mother said, "this is Robert. Robert, this is my daughter Kaylee and her husband Thomas, and you remember Monica and Derek." Of course Robert remembered Monica. Monica had met him already. This whole thing had been orchestrated by Monica, I realized. Monica had vetted him. Monica had probably facilitated the introduction. Robert shook hands with everyone. He said nice things about the house, about my mother, about how much he had been looking forward to meeting us. He seemed like a genuinely good person. There was nothing wrong with him, and yet my stomach had begun to feel very strange. We went to dinner. My mother had made her usual things, a roast chicken, potatoes, a salad from the garden. It was all very normal, but there was a tension at the table that I couldn't quite locate. Monica kept making careful conversation. Derek kept checking his phone. Thomas was being very kind, trying to include Robert in stories about the hospital. And my mother kept looking at Robert, like she had found something she thought she'd lost forever. Halfway through dinner, as we were passing the salad around, Monica said, "So, Mom, you have something to tell everyone." My mother set down her fork. She looked at Robert. Robert reached over and took her hand. "We got married," my mother said. 2 weeks ago. It was a very small ceremony, just the two of us and 2 friends of Robert's. We wanted to tell you all in person." The shock that moved through the table was immediate and physical. Derek dropped his fork. Thomas looked at me, and I felt it, a deep, cold certainty that I had missed something important, that something had been happening that I wasn't supposed to know about. "Congratulations," I heard myself say. My voice sounded very far away. "We are very happy," Robert said. He was still holding my mother's hand. He said it like he was speaking to people he loved, like he believed that this announcement was good news that would be received with genuine joy. "This is wonderful, Mom," Monica said, and she stood up and hugged my mother. And in that moment, I understood that Monica had known about this, that Monica had been brought into the secret, that Monica had already been welcomed into the new architecture of my mother's life. The dinner continued. We finished eating. My mother brought out a cake, and with each passing moment I could feel the distance growing between me and everyone else at that table. I was sitting in the exact same room, but I was very far away. When we got to the car later, Thomas asked if I was okay. "I'm fine," I said. "You didn't seem fine at dinner." "I'm just tired," I said. "It's been a long week." He didn't push. Thomas never pushed. We drove home in silence. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for another month, was that Robert wasn't a retired professor from Sacramento State. Robert wasn't a man my mother had met at a book club, at least not in the way that story implied. Robert was Robert Feynman, and he had a history with my family that nobody had mentioned. I found out because he came to my office. I was the director of cardiothoracic surgery at the University of California, Davis Medical Center. I had an office on the 4th floor of the hospital. My assistant screened most of my appointments, but I had an open-door policy with patients because I believed then, and still believe now, that surgeons should be available to the people whose hearts they were going to cut open. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was looking over a patient's scans when my assistant knocked and said, "Dr. Spini, there's a Robert Feynman in the waiting room. He says it's personal, but he'd like to speak with you if you have a moment." I didn't place the name immediately. I had been thinking about the scans in front of me. A valve replacement, probably. The calcification was significant, and it took me a moment to surface from the medical into the personal. "Robert Feynman, my mother's new husband." "Give me a minute," I told my assistant. I straightened my desk, put on my white coat, performed the role of the professional woman who had her life together. When I opened the door, Robert stood. He looked different in the neutral light of my office waiting room. He looked smaller somehow, less confident. "Dr. Spini," he said, "I apologize for coming by unannounced. I tried calling your office, but I wasn't sure if you'd return the call." "Of course," I said, because I was trained in politeness, in hospitality, in making difficult people feel comfortable. "Come in." He came into my office. I closed the door. I gestured for him to sit, and then I sat behind my desk, creating a barrier between us. "What can I do for you?" I asked. He took a breath. I could see him gathering his courage, the way you do before you confess something. "I wanted to talk to you about my heart," he said. "Your mother mentioned that you're a cardiologist." "I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon," I corrected, "which means I perform surgical interventions on cardiac and thoracic patients. For diagnostics and non-surgical care, you'd want to see a cardiologist." "Right," he said. "Yes, but I also wanted to talk to you about something else, something personal." Every instinct I have was screaming at me to stand up, to end this conversation, to say that I didn't have time. But something kept me sitting. Some part of me already knew that this was important, that this was a moment that was going to matter. "I should tell you," Robert said, "that I knew you when you were younger, not directly, but I was around your family for a period of time." The room tilted very slightly. "What do you mean, you were around my family?" "I'm James," he said. The words didn't make sense at first. They floated in the space between us like something in a foreign language. James, the name of the boy I had loved at 16, the name of the boy who had been stolen from me by a lie, the name I had worked very hard to stop thinking about, which is to say I thought about it constantly in the way that important things haunt you. "I'm James Feynman," he continued, and now I could see it in the structure of his face, in the way he held himself. "I changed my name when I was in my 20s. I needed to be a different person. I needed to start over. I became Robert." I couldn't speak. I couldn't generate words. I was 16 years old and in the library, and someone was seeing me, and it was the most wonderful and most dangerous thing that had ever happened. "I don't understand," I finally said. "Why are you telling me this? Why are you married to my mother?" "I'm not married to your mother because of you," he said, and his voice was very gentle. "I love your mother. I want to be very clear about that. I met her genuinely at a book club and we developed a genuine relationship. But when I found out she was your mother, when you told her about me at that dinner, I realized that I had a chance to make something right, or at least to stop running from something that had defined my entire adult life." "You're running from me," I said. "It wasn't a question." "I'm running from what happened between us," he said. "I'm running from the fact that I let you go, that I didn't fight for you, that I accepted the story your family told about me and I left. And I spent 23 years becoming successful, so that it wouldn't matter that I had failed you in the most important moment." I stood up. I needed him to leave. I needed him to get out of my office, out of my hospital, out of my mother's life. "Stop," I said. "Kaylee." "I'm a grown woman," I said. "I'm a successful surgeon. I have a marriage and a career and a life. I don't need you to make anything right. I don't need your atonement." "I know," he said. "I know you don't need anything from me, but I need—" He stopped. He looked down at his hands. "I spent my entire life knowing that I had left someone at a moment when they needed me, and I became very successful and I helped a lot of people and I had a good career and none of it mattered, because I knew that I had failed the one person whose failure has defined me." "Get out," I said. He stood, he walked toward the door, and then he stopped. "Your sister lied," he said. "I don't know if you figured that out yet, but Monica told your parents that I was cheating on you. She lied to break us up. I don't know why. Maybe she needed to maintain her position as the favorite child. Maybe she was jealous that you were finally happy. Maybe she was just cruel. But whatever her reason, I want you to know that it wasn't real. The story she told was a complete fabrication, and I should have fought harder. I should have made you believe me." He left, and I sat in my office for a very long time. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Monica. I didn't do anything except finish my work schedule for the day and drive home. Thomas was at the hospital doing a trauma surgery. The house was very quiet. I sat on the couch and I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I cried, not the careful, controlled tears of someone who is maintaining emotional discipline, but real crying, the kind where your whole body breaks, The kind where you're not sure if you're going to be able to put yourself back together. When Thomas came home, he found me still there. He didn't ask questions. He just sat down and let me cry into his shoulder. And for the first time in our marriage, I told him something true. My sister lied about something very important when I was 16, I said. She lied to my parents about a boy I loved. She lied to destroy him, or maybe to destroy what we had. I've never known which. And because of her lie, I lost him, and I spent 23 years thinking that I couldn't trust my own judgment, that love was dangerous, that letting someone see me was the fastest way to be abandoned. Thomas was quiet for a long time. And now he's married to your mother, he said. It wasn't a question. He changed his name, I said. He became a different person. He became successful enough that maybe it wouldn't hurt anymore. And he found my mother and he loved her genuinely, and then he figured out who I was, and now he's trying to save me. Are you going to let him? Thomas asked. I don't know, I said. I don't think I know how. The next morning I called my mother. I didn't call my therapist. I didn't call Monica. I called my mother and I told her that I knew who Robert was. I told her that he had come to my office. I told her that he had told me about James. There was a long silence on the line. I'm sorry, she said. I wanted to tell you, but I wasn't sure how. And Robert wasn't sure if you'd want to know. He said he would respect whatever you wanted. He said if you wanted him out of our lives, he would leave. Is he going to? I asked. No, my mother said, because I love him, and I don't think he should have to disappear again. He spent enough of his life running from his own past. I could have argued. I could have told her that Robert was a liar, that his presence in our family was a violation, that she had betrayed me by marrying him without telling me first. But I didn't, because I was beginning to understand something. When did Monica introduce you? I asked. Another long silence. About 8 months ago, my mother said. She had run into him at a conference, and she recognized him. She realized who he was, and instead of just moving on, she orchestrated an introduction between us. Why would Monica do that? I asked. I think, my mother said slowly, because she's spent a lot of years feeling guilty about what she did, and I think she was trying to fix it. I think she was trying to find a way to bring you peace. By marrying him, I said. That's not peace, Mom, that's just making it worse. I know, my mother said. I told her that, but she said that she thought if you two had a chance to see each other again, if you had a chance to talk to him, maybe you could find a way to move forward. I hung up the phone. I got up and I went to the bathroom and I threw up. Then I sat in my car in the driveway and I shook for 2 hours. Because what I was beginning to understand was that Monica hadn't been trying to fix anything. Monica had orchestrated a situation where she could continue to be the person who controlled the narrative, where she could position herself as the one with the power to bring people together, to make things right, to fix problems that she had created. And my mother, desperate for connection with her daughter, desperate to understand why I had built walls that she couldn't penetrate, had allowed herself to be part of the story, had allowed herself to be the vehicle through which my sister could demonstrate that she had always been right, that her lie had been justified, that everything that had happened was ultimately fine because look, here was the happy ending. Except it wasn't a happy ending, it was a cruel joke. It was a way of saying to me, you've been punished enough, now you can see what you lost, now you can be grateful. And I refused to be grateful, I refused to be part of Monica's redemption story. What I did instead was the thing I had always done. I went to work. I didn't answer my mother's calls. I didn't answer Monica's increasingly frantic messages. I didn't think about the fact that the man I had loved when I was 16 was in my family now, married to my mother, walking through my childhood home like he had always belonged there. Instead, I focused on the things I could control. I had a patient who needed a valve replacement. I had a research paper that needed to be revised. I had presentations to give, surgeries to perform, a hospital to help run. I had a life that didn't include my family, and for a very long time that had been enough. 6 weeks passed. I didn't hear from anyone. I didn't reach out to anyone. It was, in many ways, the return to the silence that had defined my family's relationship since my father died. And then Thomas said to me one night, I think you need to talk to someone. I have a therapist, I said. Not a therapist, he said. I think you need to talk to your family. My family has never wanted to hear what I actually think, I said. Why would I start now? Because you're disappearing again, Thomas said. Because you're doing the thing you always do when things are hard. You're making yourself very small and very separate. And I watched you do that for 5 years before you met me, and I promised myself that if I was with you, I wouldn't let it happen again. What do you want me to do? I asked. I want you to tell them the truth, he said. I want you to tell them why you're angry. I want you to stop pretending that this doesn't matter to you. I didn't want to do that, but Thomas was right. I was disappearing, and I had spent enough of my life disappearing. I called my mother. I told her that I wanted to have dinner. I told her that I wanted Monica to be there, and I told her that I wanted to talk about what had happened. She agreed with a quality of relief in her voice that suggested she had been waiting for this. Of course she had. My mother understood that the silence was unsustainable. She understood that I couldn't pretend forever. The dinner was a week later, at my mother's house, the same house where I had learned not to matter. When I arrived, Monica was already there. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping. She looked like someone who had been waiting for punishment. "Hi," she said, and her voice was very small. "Hello," I said. I didn't hug her. I didn't perform the role of the sister who was just happy to see her. Robert wasn't at dinner. My mother had asked him to leave for the evening. She understood that this conversation needed to happen without his presence. We sat at the dinner table, my mother, Monica, and me, the same table where I had told them about James when I was 16, the same table where I had been told that I couldn't trust my own judgment. "I want you to understand something," I said, and my voice was very steady. I spent 23 years of my life believing a lie. I spent 23 years thinking that I couldn't trust myself, that my judgment was fundamentally flawed, that the people I loved would inevitably betray me. And all of that was because of something Monica did when she was 19 years old. My mother looked at Monica. Monica was staring at the table. "Monica," I said, "what you did to me was cruel. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something you did because you were young and didn't understand consequences. You did it deliberately. You lied to control a situation where you weren't the center of attention, and I need you to understand that what you did shaped every single relationship I've had since then. Every time I've tried to trust someone, that lie has been there, whispering to me that I can't believe what I'm seeing, that the person I love is betraying me, that I should protect myself by not letting anyone see me." "Kaylee," Monica said, and her voice broke, "I'm so sorry. I've been so sorry for so long." "I don't care if you're sorry," I said. "Sorry doesn't make it go away. Sorry doesn't restore the 23 years I lost. Sorry doesn't undo the way I've built my entire personality around not needing anyone." I turned to my mother. "And you," I said. "You chose to believe her, not because you had evidence but because you wanted her to be right. You wanted me to be the kind of daughter who needed protecting, who was naive, who needed you to guide her. And when I tried to tell you that she was lying, when I tried to show you that James was innocent, you sided with her anyway. You chose your favorite child over the truth." My mother opened her mouth, then she closed it, then she started to cry. "I know," she said. "I know that's what I did. I've been thinking about it every day since you found out about Robert. And I can't undo it. I can't go back and be different. But I need you to know that it was never because you didn't matter. It was because you mattered so much that I could project anything I wanted onto you and you would accept it. Monica needed me more. Monica needed me to believe in her. And I let that need override my responsibility to you." "That's not good enough," I said. "I know," my mother said. We sat in silence, and something in me wanted to continue, wanted to keep peeling back the layers, wanting to catalogue every way that I had been failed, every moment where my family had chosen something else over me. But I was beginning to understand something else. I was beginning to understand that my family was never going to be the family I had wanted them to be. They were never going to be the people who saw me first, who believed me automatically, who put my needs before their own comfort. And that was going to have to be okay. "I'm not interested in a relationship where I have to keep earning your trust," I said. "I'm not interested in a family where everyone is constantly performing and pretending. I'm not interested in Monica's redemption arc or your guilt or Robert's atonement for things that happened when I was too young to protect myself." "What are you interested in?" my mother asked. "I'm interested in the truth," I said. "I'm interested in people who can admit their failures without expecting forgiveness. I'm interested in a family that is real, and I'm going to need some time to figure out if that's something that you all are willing to be." I stood up, I left the table, I walked to my car. And as I was driving home, I realized that I had finally done something I had never done before. I had spoken my truth without expecting it to change anyone. I had said the hard things without needing them to be received well. I had been myself without apologizing for it. It was terrifying, it was exhilarating, it was the most honest thing I had done in my entire life. What happened after that was slow. There was no dramatic reconciliation. There was no moment where everyone realized they had been wrong and everything became perfect. What happened was much smaller than that and much more real. Monica started therapy. Real therapy, not the kind where you go for 6 sessions and declare yourself healed. She started therapy, and she started the long, difficult work of understanding why she had needed to destroy my relationship at 16, why she had needed to maintain her position as the special one at any cost, why she had spent 2 decades feeling guilty about something she had never directly apologized for. I didn't see her during this time, I didn't call her, I didn't update her on my life. I simply existed in a state of no contact with my sister, and I discovered something remarkable. I was fine. I was more than fine. I was, for the first time in my life, free from the need to maintain a relationship that hurt me. My mother wrote me a letter, not an email but an actual letter, with her handwriting on paper she had probably chosen carefully. It said, "Kaylee, I've been writing and rewriting this letter for 3 weeks, and I still don't know how to say what I need to say, so I'm just going to say it. You were right, I did choose Monica over you. I did, over and over again, for as long as you can remember. And I did it because she needed me to, because she demanded my attention in a way that you never did, because it was easier to give Monica what she wanted than to figure out what you were asking for. I missed so much, your science fair, your recital, your dreams, your pain. And then when the moment came where I had to choose between believing you and believing Monica, I made the same choice I had made 1,000 times before. I believed the daughter who demanded to be believed. I'm writing this because I want you to know that I understand, finally, what I took from you. I understand that I taught you to make yourself invisible. I understand that I made you believe that your perception of reality couldn't be trusted. I understand that I hurt you in ways that no mother should hurt her child. I can't fix that, I can't go back and be different, but I want you to know that I see you now. I see what you've become despite how I failed you, and I'm proud of you, not because you're successful though you are, but because you survived, because you took the worst of what I gave you and you turned it into something that helped you become a real person. I love you, I know you might not believe that, I know I have a lot to prove, but I want you to know that I'm here whenever you're ready. Mom. I read this letter 7 times, I cried, and then I put it away. I wasn't ready to forgive her. I wasn't ready to pretend that things were okay, but I was beginning to understand that forgiveness wasn't a binary thing. It wasn't something you gave all at once or not at all. It was a practice. It was something you did every day in small ways when you decided to be open instead of closed. 3 months passed, 4, 6. Thomas kept reminding me that I was doing better, that I was smiling more, that I was less sharp, less guarded, less like a person who was constantly bracing for impact. And then Monica called me. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up the phone. "Hi," she said, and she sounded like she had been crying. "Hi," I said. "I wanted to talk to you," she said. "Not about what happened. I mean about what happened, but not to ask for forgiveness or to explain myself. I just wanted to talk to you like you're a real person who I did something to, and I need to understand what I did." "Okay," I said. "Why are you agreeing?" she asked. "I thought you didn't want to talk to me." "I didn't," I said, "but I'm trying to be open to new information." And so we talked. We talked for 2 hours, and Monica told me about her own insecurities, about the ways she had felt threatened by the fact that I was becoming smart in a way that mattered, about the fact that she had been afraid of being left behind. She told me about the crushing weight of being the favorite child, of knowing that any failure would be a betrayal of everything our parents had invested in her. "I was so afraid of not being special," she said, "that I had to make sure nobody else could be special, and you were starting to be special. You were starting to be the kind of person that people looked up to, and I couldn't handle it." "You could have just talked to me," I said. "You could have said, 'I'm jealous' or 'I'm afraid' or any of the actual things that were true." "I know," she said, "but I was 19 and I was stupid and I didn't have the words. I just had this fear, and I did the thing that I knew would make the fear go away, and I've regretted it every day since." I didn't tell her that everything was fine. I didn't tell her that I forgave her, but I said, I'm glad you understand what you did, and I'm glad you're trying to be different. But I need you to understand that understanding doesn't erase the consequences. I still have to figure out how to trust you again, and that's going to take time. How much time? She asked. I don't know, I said. We'll figure it out. And that was the beginning of something, not reconciliation exactly, but the start of a process of rebuilding trust in small, incremental ways. A year passed, and then one day my mother called me and asked if I would come to dinner. Just me, she said, just the family. She said Robert wanted to see me. I almost said no, but I realized that I had spent enough of my life saying no to things. I realized that at some point, I had to take a risk on the possibility that people could change. So I said yes. When I got to my mother's house, Robert was in the kitchen with my mother. He was making pasta, and my mother was chopping vegetables, and they were moving around each other with the kind of ease that comes from genuine love. Kaylee, Robert said, and he wiped his hands on a towel. Thank you for coming. Hi, I said. I wanted to talk to you about something, he said, and I wanted to do it before dinner. I wanted to give you the option to leave if what I have to say is too much. Okay, I said. I've been thinking a lot about what happened between us, he said, and I've realized that I made a choice when I was 17 years old. I made a choice to leave you, to accept the story that your family told about me, to not fight for you. And I told myself that I made that choice because I was powerless, because I was just a kid. But the truth is that I made a choice, and I need to take responsibility for that. I know, I said, I've been thinking about that too. I want you to understand that being married to your mother is not my way of fixing what I did to you, he said. I'm not trying to atone for my failure by loving her. I love her because she's extraordinary, and she makes me happy, and she's the person I want to spend my remaining years with. But I also want to be in your life in some way, not as a replacement for anything, just as a person who cares about your well-being. I didn't say anything for a long time. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he continued. I'm not asking you to feel grateful. I'm just asking if you're willing to see me as someone who is sorry, who understands what he did, who is trying to do better. I'll try, I said. That's all I can promise, I'll try. We had dinner. It wasn't a perfect dinner. There were awkward moments where I was very aware of the history between Robert and me, but there were also moments where I could see how much he and my mother loved each other, and where I could feel something inside me beginning to relax. And when I left that night, my mother walked me to the door and she hugged me, really hugged me like she meant it, like she was saying, I see you, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep trying. 2 years passed, 2 full years of small dinners, of conversations that were sometimes easy and sometimes hard, of learning how to be a family that was real instead of a family that was performing. I still see my therapist. I still work on the ways that my childhood shaped my relationships, my self-perception, my ability to trust. I still have moments where the old fear comes back, where I feel the weight of invisibility, where I wonder if the people I love actually see me, or if they're just seeing the version of me that I'm allowing them to see. But I also have something I didn't have before. I have a family that is trying. Not a family that is perfect, not a family that never fails, but a family that is willing to show up and do the work. And I learned something else, something that surprised me. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean the hurt doesn't matter. It means that you're willing to live in the same world as someone who hurt you. It means that you're willing to let them be more than the worst thing they ever did. Monica is in my life again. Not the way we were before, we'll never be that close, and I'm not sure we should be, but she's in my life, and she's a different person. She's humbler, she's gentler, she's working on the ways that her need to be special had made her cruel. Robert is in my life too, and that's strange because he's the reminder of everything I lost, but he's also the reminder that people can change, that people who fail you can become people who show up for you, that sometimes the people who hurt you are also the people who can help you heal. And my mother finally sees me. Not the image of me that she projected onto, not the invisible daughter who could be overlooked, but me, the real me, the flawed me, the me who is both brilliant and broken, both strong and fragile, both extraordinarily successful and still learning how to be human. This is what I want to tell you if you're reading this and recognizing yourself in this story. If you're the person who was told that your perception was wrong, that your love wasn't real, that you couldn't be trusted with your own truth, that wasn't okay, and it's not your job to fix it for the people who hurt you. But it might be your choice to let them try. I spent 23 years being invisible. I spent 23 years building a life around the belief that I couldn't let anyone see me. And all of that was, in its way, a kind of armor. It kept me safe. It kept me from being hurt again. But it also kept me from being known. It kept me from being loved. It kept me from being anything other than a collection of achievements and performances. And then, at 39 years old, I began to take off the armor. Not all at once, not in some dramatic, movie-like moment where everything changed, but slowly, carefully, with the help of people who loved me, and the help of someone I was paying to help me see the parts of myself that I had learned to hide. I stopped making myself invisible. I stopped expecting that if I was just good enough, just accomplished enough, just invisible enough, that my family would somehow start to value me. I accepted that my family had failed me in significant ways, and I also accepted that they were capable of trying to do better. I'm not going to tell you that everything is perfect now. I'm not going to tell you that I've fully healed from the trauma of being treated like I didn't matter. I'm not going to tell you that my relationship with my family is easy or uncomplicated. But I am going to tell you this: I'm alive, I'm seen, I'm known by people who love me. And every day I get to choose whether to let the people who hurt me continue to hurt me, or whether to let them be part of my life in a new way. And that choice, I think, is everything. My name is Me.She, and I am finally, after 39 years, beginning to understand what it means to be loved for who I actually am, rather than what I can accomplish or how invisible I can make myself. It's not much, but it's real, and in a life that has been constructed on the foundation of performance and silence, real is everything. Epilogue. The last time I saw James, Robert, in a professional capacity, he came to my office to discuss a surgical consultation. Not because he needed my expertise, but because he wanted to normalize the idea of us being in the same space, working together, being colleagues and family at once. I walked him through his test results. I explained what the imaging showed, and when we were done with the clinical part of the conversation, he asked me if I had ever thought about what would have happened if Monica's lie had never happened. Every day, I said. For 23 years I've thought about that. Do you think we would have worked out? He asked. I considered the question seriously. I don't know, I said. We were 16 and 17. We were thinking about love in the way that only people who have never been truly hurt can think about it. Maybe we would have broken each other's hearts in a different way. Maybe we would have built something real, but we never got the chance to find out, and that's what I can't get past. I'm sorry, he said. I know, I said, and I think that's the best we can do now. We both say we are sorry. We both acknowledge that we failed each other, and then we move forward as the people we've become, not the people we might have been. He nodded, and we talked about his surgical plan, and he left. And the next time he came to my office, it felt less momentous, just a man visiting his wife's daughter at her workplace, just a doctor discussing care with a patient. Real, ordinary, a kind of peace I never thought I would have. I think often about the dinner where my mother announced that she and Robert were married. I think about the shock of it. I think about the way I felt like the world had rearranged itself without my permission. But I've come to understand that the world was always rearranging itself without my permission. I just had been too focused on making myself invisible to notice. Now I notice. Now I see the ways that people are constantly changing, constantly trying to be different versions of themselves, constantly failing and trying again. And I see my family as part of that human project, as people who hurt me and are also people who are capable of trying to be better. I still don't have all the answers. I still have days where I feel the weight of everything that happened. I still have moments where I wonder if I should have insisted on more accountability, more apologies, more formal recognition of the ways I was wronged. But I also have dinner with my mother and her husband and my sister and her family, and I feel something that I didn't think I would feel again. I feel like I belong. Not because my family has become perfect, not because they've somehow undone all the damage, but because they're trying. And because I'm allowing myself to see them as real people with real failures, doing the best they can with what they have. And that, it turns out, is enough. My name is Me.She. I'm 39 years old. For the first time in my life, I'm beginning to understand what it means to be loved not for what I accomplish, but for who I am. It's taken me decades, it's cost me more than I can calculate, but I'm here, I'm real. I'm finally, after all these years, allowed to be seen. and that makes all of it worth it.